Hello, I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. Welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, a show about emerging technology and trends in mobility with leaders and innovators who make it all happen. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to be joined by Tal Kashipov, Vice President of Product, Cipia. On today's episode, he'll discuss Cipia's driver and occupancy monitoring systems and how the technology can create a safer and better in-car experience. We hope you enjoy this episode. Tal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and pleasure to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because driver monitoring is going to play a critical, vital role in the development of SAE Level 2 and Level 3 vehicles. There are some analysts and pundits that say without driver monitoring, you cannot scale to Level 3. There's some pundits saying that you really need driver monitoring to unlock the true benefits of SAE Level 2. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. Since driver monitoring is a topic in automotive world, but some of the main consumers or listeners might not know, Tal, what is the current state of driver monitoring?
By state, I guess we can discuss two aspects. One is the adoption of driving monitoring, which feels still nascent, although we see it coming to vehicles in Europe, in the US, in China, in Japan, worldwide, Korea. So it's certainly something that automotive manufacturers, OEMs, recognize the importance of. There is also the legislation that entered into effect and the safety standards that truly push it forward. So we can expect more and more vehicles to adopt it in the near future. And if you look at Europe and the general safety regulations update there, then we know that by 2026, all vehicles from all M&N categories will actually have to have a driver monitoring system, both for drowsiness and distraction.
What happens to the vehicles, the 25s, the 24s, the 23s that do not have driver monitoring? Will they still be able to operate in the EU?
Well, the requirements are divided into the cutoff date for receiving type approval. So already in July of 2024, a vehicle that wants type approval has to have driver distraction monitoring included. But from July of 2026, the distraction monitoring is required for registration. So a vehicle cannot be registered if it doesn't have the technology inside. So also vehicles that received type approval before July of 2024 and were perfectly sold in Europe beforehand, by July of 2026, I guess through a facelift or something along these lines, will have to have the technology introduced.
That opens up the whole secondary market, the aftermarket. Is there an emerging market there to upgrade, if you want to use the term, retrofit vehicles to become in compliance with the EU regulations?
I'm actually not sure about the requirements of the type approval, but I believe that it has to be part of the vehicle. And of course, in order to be part of the vehicle, it has to be automotive grade, as opposed to aftermarket products that can meet only a commercial grade standard. We do see interest in driver monitoring for the aftermarket, particularly for fleet management. As you know, with fleets, we see a lower turnover than private vehicles. And because the vehicles are retained for longer years, we can expect the technology to arrive to the vehicles as embedded in the vehicle, as a new vehicle, to take longer. That's why fleet managers already want to enjoy the benefits today, and they're looking for aftermarket solutions. Cipia actually offers, beside the OEM offering, the software that we offer for integration, also an aftermarket device for integration by telematics service providers as an offering for fleet management systems.
Are the fleet managers putting in your aftermarket device to reduce risk, or if a driver's goofing off or doing something they're not supposed to, or they're trying to lower their insurance rates? What is the main driver from fleet managers to put an aftermarket driver assistance program in there?
It's sometimes hard for us to remember as, private people, as consumers, what are the ramifications of an accident for a fleet? So, for us, if, let's say, God forbid, that there are no injuries or death, it typically ends up with visiting the auto shop and fixing a dent or something along these lines. But for a fleet manager, it means now that there is an asset in the fleet with downtime. It means that the service level agreement to the customer is hit and I may need to pay penalties. It means that the cargo may have been hit and I need to recuperate it through the insurance. It means that my premiums go up. The bundle it becomes of such enormous proportions that reducing the accident rate for any fleet is a critical aspect of the efficiency, not just logistically, but also financially. So it's a critical point and something that is really top of mind. And it's actually truly amazing to see how, with the right prompts, with the right feedback to the driver monitoring system can actually change the behavior. I have an example of one of the fleets that we went into in the first week. 20% of the drivers are with no seatbelt. 4 weeks later, already 80% of the drivers wear seatbelts properly, because you provide constant feedback. And as human beings, we adapt. It's very anecdotal, but it was so powerful in my realization of how we change behavior. We were at MWC in Barcelona, and SEAT introduced us as a POC in their vehicle. There was a reporter sitting in the driver's seat, and the system was designed there to provide prompts whenever the tester or the reporter, whoever is sitting in the driver's seat, does not look through the front windshield. They got an audio prompt: please pay attention to the road. Okay, so the reporter is very nice. He's starting to ask me questions. I stand outside of the vehicle, and I remind you, the vehicle is stationary. It's on a stage. There are plenty of people around. It's not moving anywhere. The reporter looks at me to the left to ask me a question against the audio prompt: please pay attention to the road. So he immediately turns his face to the road. Then, and he listens to my answer that way. Then he's asking me another question, turns his face toward me, gets another prompt and tries to behave and looks again at the road. The third question, he threw from the angle of his mouth to the left while still keeping a look at the road, so we wouldn't get the prompt. And he wasn't even driving. But the feedback that we receive as humans changes our behavior. And it was amazing to see that happening within 60 seconds. So the driver monitoring system as a tool, even before we get to the vehicle intervention, to changing the forward collision warning or activating minimum risk maneuver or any of these things, it already changes the driver behavior, even through basic feedback. So it's a very powerful tool, and I'm very excited to see it.
That's a very profound change. With the prompts, obviously they were annoying because you got his attention. How would you define that prompt? Was it haptic feedback? Was it beep, 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 beep? What was it?
Well, at this particular case, it was just an audio feedback of a sentence of please pay attention to the road, literally, and nothing else. But, well, when you see the general safety regulations in Europe, they call for really any type of feedback. So it can be audio, it can be haptic, it can be visual, and different OEMs may decide to apply it in different ways. It's really flexible from that perspective, and obviously the best thing for us as human is to combine different channels, because I may be with the windows down and the wind blowing and everything, and I may miss an audio feedback, but then a haptic feedback will actually pay attention. So, and a visual feedback can be very effective, but if it's emanating from the front, and at the very same time, I'm actually looking to the right and I need to get the distraction alert, I'm going to miss the flashing light that is in the front because I'm looking to the right. So hence the importance of actually combining several types of feedback.
You take a vehicle today with a steering wheel. There are certain ways and certain OEMs globally you can block the driver monitoring system. It gives you this alert, please move your steering wheel. Where is the most ideal place to put the driver monitoring system so a person can't play trickeries, and put the steering wheel where it blocks the driver monitoring system?
So you're actually asking two different questions, or the answer is divided into two different topics. One is the ideal position for a driver monitoring system camera. And the second is how to prevent trickery of the system. The camera position from CPS perspective is flexible, because we realize that our customers, especially our direct customers, which under the traditional model is typically the tier one, each tier one owns a different real estate of the vehicle. Some own the instrument cluster, some own the infotainment console, some own the trim and the A-pillar covers, some own the overhead console. And we want to work with as many as possible. So we create a system from multiple angles. So no matter where you put the camera, we can provide the adequate outputs. So from that perspective, CPS solution is fully flexible. Having said that, there is no really ideal solution because each position offers certain trade-offs. For example, a camera on the steering wheel column that looks straight at the driver's face. It's great because it's very centered. You have great coverage of gaze to the left, to the right. You can identify different areas of interest the driver is looking in the vehicle with high level of accuracy. Having said that, it's behind the steering wheel. The steering wheel moves while you turn. You occlude the camera naturally simply because you control the vehicle. So the availability of the system is better suited for the driving straight and long stretches of the road, which is where distraction and drowsiness really occurs. So it's not a material flaw or a hindrance to the system, but it limits the availability of the system. If you put the camera on top of the infotainment console, then you're off to the right of the driver. You don't get as good coverage as possible when the driver is looking left, but you don't get the steering wheel occlusions, for example. So each and every camera offers a certain position, offers a certain trade-off, but everything is workable. I can say that we are already in serial production from all 4 camera locations that I mentioned. So, and they all work. So from that perspective, it's not a concern. Regarding the trickery or the attempts to block the system, one of the things that you can do is include, and that's what we do, we include certain measures in the system that analyze the video and detect failure points. For example, if we see a blurry image that can be caused by an object that is very close, or a smudge on the lens or something like that, that's something that we actively look for and alert for. So we know that the system cannot be relied on because something is wrong with the system, and we can report the problem. There are different types of visual qualities that we detect, and we report them, and then the OEM can choose what to do about them.
Fascinating. Do you see some OEMs putting multiple driver monitoring systems in there for occupant detection? We're getting ready to go into the summer, and every summer you read these horrific reports of a child being left in the back seat or a dog, and NHTSA publishes this data, unfortunately, every year. Can you put a system open so you can detect occupant detection? Perhaps that there's a child or an animal in the back. If it's an electric vehicle, the air conditioning can turn on to save that child's life or that pet's life. Are you seeing that type of stuff as well?
Absolutely, though there is a caveat. So first, I would say that there is a trend in the industry to move from a pure driver monitoring or interest among OEMs to a full cabin-wide occupancy monitoring. And with the OEM's desire to cut down on costs, on hardware costs, we also see the aspiration of combining both driver monitoring and occupancy monitoring through the same wide field of view sensor that monitors the entire cabin. But with the desire to bubble down all systems into a single camera in the front of the cabin, naturally the back seat is partially occluded with the backs of the front seats or other elements. So scenarios, for example, one of the scenarios that Euro NCAP tests for child presence is a baby in a baby carrier with the canopy closed and the baby covered with a blanket all the way to the neck. It's very reasonable, right? I mean, I know that my babies spend some time in the back seat of my car that way, but there is absolutely no line of sight to the baby. So a camera would not be able to detect it and alert in the case that the baby is, God forbid, forgotten in the vehicle. That's why we also see interest, though, in radar systems in vehicles. There are radars in the bandwidth of 60 gigahertz and up that can penetrate fabrics and be sensitive enough for vibrations and motions to detect respiration and heartbeat. And these are great complements to cover the scenarios where children cannot be seen at all because they are completely occluded, whether in the baby carrier or because an infant crawled into the footwell of the back seat, or something along these lines. So to address perfectly all scenarios, there will be a need to combine technologies ultimately.
When you look at combining technology, does this evolve similar to airbags, where before you just had it in the driver, then it went to the passenger, and now that, if you want to use the term cocoon, you're surrounded by airbags? Do we get surrounded by driver monitoring and occupant detection with different form of technology to have if you want to the safest vehicle possible?
I guess so. Ultimately, there is no reason. I mean, I really veer off here and look way ahead, in the future autonomous vehicle that is truly our third space, a lounge moving on wheels that carries us in the mobility services world from point A to point B, without us even owning the vehicle, because the moment we step out, the vehicle comes to pick us up and brings us to a destination. We believe that there will be a fusion of multiple sensors to truly serve us, understand our needs, and offer us services and products that are relevant, that are desirable from our perspective for the ride. And these will be not limited only to vision and radar, but also voice, and maybe from the wearables that we wear on us, and the contextual information of where we are, the GPS, and our destination based on what the vehicle knows. And when you combine all these together, you can truly understand what's going on, who is in the car, who are they, what is their state, are they engaged right now in an activity? Let's say that I fell asleep in the car. Maybe the car should block all calls and just let me sleep. Maybe I'm right now driving with my wife and kids, and we have a 2-hour drive, and the vehicle knows that along the path, right in the middle, there is a restaurant we like. It can offer us, do you want your favorite lunch to wait for you there to pick up? Do you want to authenticate the payment with your Face ID, etc.? And so the knowledge that you get from all these sensors can truly help the vehicle understand who is inside, what's going on, what's the context, and what is the best offering to even predict our needs.
What that comes down to is experience. That's a really great experience. If it's your favorite restaurant, or perhaps it's in the morning and you're on your way to the office, or you're going to a conference, you want a cup of coffee, and it knows, it pulls there, it gives you a cup of coffee, the in-vehicle payment's already authorized, and it knows that you like your latte this way. Okay, with 2 shots of espresso, away you go. That's the future. That's somewhere where I believe that we're getting. We're not there yet, but eventually we will get there. But where we are today is driver monitoring, a growing market, a growing need for it. From a product perspective, how does the Sepia driver monitoring system work today?
Well, the system consists of 2 layers of algorithms. First of all, we receive infrared video. And we use infrared because we want to work under all lighting conditions with light that does not impede with the driver's ability to see or change their perception. So this is infrared in the 940 nanometer bandwidth, something that is beyond the visible spectrum. And the first layer is computer vision algorithms. And this layer tries to analyze the facial features of the driver, understand things like where are the eyelids and how open the eyes are, where are the pupils and the irises with respect to the eyes, and what is the gaze direction, what is the head pose of the driver. A lot of parameters that are associated with facial features. And then a second layer of human factors algorithms translate the visual cues into the physiological state of the driver. For example, how a series of blinks is translated into a level of drowsiness, or how a series of gaze directions is translated into distraction. So that's the way that the system operates. There are 2 levels. For our customers, we offer both levels simultaneously for each and every frame. So the system works in a way that the algorithms receive a frame, analyze everything that happened up to this frame, report back, and from that point onwards, the tier 1 or the OEM take this output and apply it for safety based on the available systems in the vehicle. So, for example, let's say that the vehicle is at level 0. of autonomy. At level 0, the vehicle can do nothing, but the minimum legal regulation is issue an alert in case of distraction or drowsiness. Audio, visual, haptic, we discussed it. For level 1 and level 2, the vehicle can actually do something. There are adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist. Level 2 is a combination of both with traffic jam assist or a highway driving assist. And with these systems, what Euro NCAP wants to see in order to assign the full rating for the category of safety assist, of driver monitoring, is intervention of the vehicle. So it's not enough to issue a warning, but in case the driver is distracted, the forward collision warning should already go up to the higher sensitivity. And in case the driver becomes unresponsive, and unresponsive means if the driver is distracted and receive a distraction warning, but they continue to be distracted for an additional period, it's 3 seconds and 3 seconds. So after 6 seconds, the driver is deemed unresponsive and the vehicle should engage with the minimum risk maneuver, which means it needs to lower the speed to 10 kilometers per hour or less, or even come to a full stop. So these are active safety measures that, based on the driver's state, make the vehicle behave in a certain way to save the driver and those around them. We also see interesting requirements from Consumer Reports and the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety in the US that issued guidance for their full safety rating, saying that L2 vehicles with highway driving assist, with traffic jam assist, they need to have a driver monitoring system to get the full safety rating, because the driver monitoring system has to verify the driver's attention to the road while they enjoy the L2 capabilities. The concern there is that many drivers today do not understand the limits of technology. And when they're given a vehicle with L2 capabilities, that it feels like the vehicle can drive it on its own, right? It has adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist. It does both together. I can take my hands off the steering wheel and look, mommy, no hands. It keeps the distance, it keeps the position in the lane, I'm good. But they don't understand that the vehicle cannot cope with lane markings all of a sudden breaking up, or someone breaking into my lane in front of me all of a sudden. Things that the vehicle is not designed to cope with. Hence, the driver is responsible legally and functionally, and they have to maintain their visual attention to the road at all times. Therefore, they come up with a requirement that an L2 vehicle has to have a DMS system verifying this visual attention. And of course, in level 3, where we have finally the vehicle can drive an entire segment of the road on its own, let's say the highway, still the vehicle may at any point in time along the highway, and of course when the highway ends, issue a takeover request. And at this point, the driver has to take over, so a DMS system has to verify the availability of the driver to address a takeover request.
You're right, because the limits of the technology, you know it, I know it, the majority, if not all of our listeners know the limits of the technology, but a consumer going to a car rental agency, a Sixt or a Hertz or an Avis to rent a car, oh, this is great, it drives itself. No, it doesn't drive itself. It causes issues. Is this where DMS comes in? It can, I'll use a very harsh term, it can force driver behavior to change, to really understand the true elements of what an L2 system can do. Does this put them into compliance? But not only put them into compliance, it's going to increase safety.
Absolutely. That's the goal here. Yeah, that has been our mission from day one, so it's actually very rewarding to work on such a product.
It's rewarding to work on a product. Your product can do a lot. Now, when looking at the competitive landscape, is it your algorithms that separate you from your competitors, or what is that secret sauce where the OEMs and the tier ones are signing up for Sepia?
I'm going to say that, of course, we're the best. Our leading competitors are going to say that they are the best. What I hear from customers is that the leading providers provide a pretty similar level of performance from an algorithm perspective when it comes to the basic measures of, drowsiness, distraction, etc. What sets Sepia apart is our focus on lean hardware requirements and the flexibility of the platform. So we make it a key focus to require practically for OEMs, the cheapest hardware possible and do the magic on the algorithm side where possible. Whether it's lower resolution of the camera, whether it's a linear processing requirements, whether it's the flexibility of working on more platforms and leveraging where they're interested, hardware acceleration, so we free up CPU resources for additional functions. We see a very clear trend of when driver monitoring systems were just introduced in the latest crop of vehicles into the market, the focus was very much on standalone systems. So there is an ECU that is dedicated for the driver monitoring. But as we move forward, what we see with the market trend is the shift toward domain integration. And the two primary domains are the ADAS ECU and the IVI ECU. And these ECUs, of course, are supposed to host a lot of other functions, whether it's the external ADAS perception or the internal functions of the IVI. And that's why the desire for lean hardware requirements is so important for the OEMs.
When I think of lean, I think of the Toyota's manufacturing that's been well done with the lean manufacturing process. But when I also think of lean, I think power efficient. I think of ARM. How power efficient are the CEFIA driver monitoring systems? Are they extremely power efficient, tying into your lean strategy?
Absolutely. It really depends. So honestly, the choice of an SoC to work on is typically not something that we control. It's something that the OEM already has in mind when they plan their architecture. And we need to play along and fit within the different platforms. I can say that the lowest platform from a power consumption perspective that we reached is the OmniVision OAX8000, where if I recall correctly off the top of my mind, and please don't catch me if I'm mistaken, but it's less than half a watt or something like that for our system to run. So it's, it's pretty negligent. It's not something that you feel at any scale when you have the entire car in mind.
That's very important as we shift to electrification and we eventually shift to autonomy. But that raises the question, how? How are you able to run a DMS system with such low power when there are competitors in the market that use a lot more power to run their systems?
I think it ties back to our roots. So CEFIA, when it started its path, was known as EyeSight. We changed the names a couple of years ago. And in our previous incarnation, we were always an embedded computer vision company. But we focused on embedded computer vision for consumer electronics for touch-free gesture control interfaces. And we had customers such as Lenovo, Sony, AMD, Toshiba, NTT Docomo, really well-known household brands. And in all these devices, what characterized our activity was that the device was already designed and ready. And when we came in with our solution, we were told, okay, you want to run on our laptop? We didn't have you in mind. We didn't plan for you. You need to make do with the leanest amount of processing power possible and with the existing camera, no matter what it was. So we developed this state of mind of being agile to the and agnostic to the platform and requiring the least amount of resources. We also learned how to combine classic computer vision with advanced AI, because AI typically neural networks tend to be heavier, while classic computer vision is less performant, but a lot more nimble. But when you combine both and you use each in the right section of the flow, you can enjoy the benefit of both and optimize the overall system performance.
Would we be having this conversation today if your company did not start in the consumer electronics industry?
I don't know, yet I have to know that I'm very thankful for the fact that in 2017, Euro NCAP released the roadmap that required for the first time driver monitoring in vehicles. Very shortly after, we experienced a surge of interest among OEMs who came over to us and told us, hey, we heard you're awesome computer vision company. What do you have for in-cabin sensing? And initially we didn't have anything. But 2018 was dedicated to building a demo, establishing the product market fit, starting developing a product. And in 2019, it was clear to us that the consumer electronics market never picked up. We never reached the tipping point to be able to reach a mass market adoption. And unfortunately, I don't think that any gesture control technology in the world reached that. Even Microsoft and the Kinect ultimately didn't penetrate the market as they hoped. So we're very thankful to identify a new market where our technology can be more meaningful to, save lives, be a must in every vehicle at a certain point. So from that perspective, the pivot was a no-brainer and a great help in focusing the company and its efforts.
You saw the opportunity, you saw the pivot. I had a Microsoft Kinect. I played with it. It was fun to play the video games, but it got old after a while. But here you are, so you're not taking that, we're just gonna wait this out and see where it goes. You take the leadership to pivot, you put your computer vision technology to work, and now you're scaling in driver monitoring. You're doing really well. You're running low power, and I want to highlight you're running low power. So as more EVs come online, you can go in EVs, and as more EVs come online, would take more computing power, you can go in there as well because of your heritage in the consumer electronics industry. Intel, putting this whole conversation together, in your opinion, what is the future of driver monitoring?
First of all, I already mentioned the fact that the driver monitoring, the occupancy monitoring will coalesce into one system, one sensor, one SoC, one everything to do everything together. We'll also see specifically on the driving monitoring front, we already see interest with Euro NCAP and other regulatory bodies and safety standards in capabilities to detect driver intoxication, alcohol impairment, cognitive load. So today we focus very much on visual attention, on visual distractions. But sometimes it may look as if the driver looks at the road, but their mind is somewhere else because I had a fight with my boss, because I'm emotionally distraught, because I'm excited about something, whatever it may be. So there is a need to detect these aspects as well. And these are some of the next steps that you can look for coming into driver monitoring.
Emotions will be very intense because there are individuals, and this is a horrible term, that have road rage, and they go absolutely ballistically nuts. If you can detect road rage, you're going to save a lot of lives.
Well, I have to say that this is an extremely challenging area because, first of all, there is a difference between the expression of a person and their sentiment inside. Sometimes the expression betrays what we feel, and sometimes it does not. Like, right now I'm smiling and I seem very pleasant, but I may be furious inside, right? It's even more creepy that way. So, and that's something that is hard to tell from a visual perspective. But the even more challenging aspect is what would OEMs do with this information? There's a lot of uncertainty. So let's say that you detect a certain emotion. Is it legitimate to interpret a certain emotion as dangerous for the driving task? And I'm not sure. I can seem furious during a phone call because I'm angry at someone I'm talking to. It has nothing to do with road rage. How do you interpret the target of my anger? And until we can do that, and I'm not sure we'll ever be able to, it's too risky and to a certain extent irresponsible to apply it in a way that overtakes the vehicle and does not let a driver drive, for example. It's, there are other aspects, even with technologies that exist today, like the drowsiness detection. Let's say that a driver gets into the car and they already look drowsy. I can tell you right now they're tired. It's unhealthy for them to drive. But if they need to drive only 2 blocks away to get back to their home, should I prohibit that? Well, not me. Should the OEM prohibit that and lock down the vehicle? It's just 2 blocks. It's not that dangerous. The person is tired, but it's not at the level that they cannot sustain themselves all the way home. As opposed to now they have a 2-hour drive, but as long as you don't know this information, you don't have the context, you can't always make the ultimate judgment.
And then you open up the can of worms called privacy.
I actually don't see privacy as a can of worms because from the very beginning, it was clear that privacy is one of the most sacred values that we have to respect. And the product was designed with privacy in mind. The system works in a way that each frame that we receive is translated to metadata. And the image from our perspective can be discarded and deleted immediately. Even the metadata is not retained by us. It's used for ongoing calculations. And then, again, this data can be deleted too. Even for facial recognition, and some of our customers use our Face ID for personalization purposes in the vehicle to know which member of the household is actually driving the vehicle and adapt certain aspects. We translate each new face that we see in the image into a feature vector of 512 values. And this feature vector is saved as the driver ID. When we see a new face, we translate them to numbers and we compare numbers to numbers. We never compare an image to image and we do not retain the image. We can't even backtrack from numbers to an image. It's a one-way process. So all from privacy perspective, privacy and security perspective, everything is fully secure, no concerns.
So you're doing the right thing on the privacy side. I respect that. But if an OEM decides to make the decision that individual's drowsy, they don't only have to go 2 blocks. That's a whole nother can of worms. That's not your can of worms.
Correct.
That's for the OEMs to figure out. But Sepia is really focused on privacy. Tal, I've learned a lot during this conversation. I found it absolutely fascinating. And as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
In case some of the listeners are from OEMs and they own the vehicle interior experience, I urge you to push us and also leverage the outputs that we provide as much as possible. Because today there is a tendency to focus on the legal and safety standards requirements to ensure that the safety aspects are addressed. But when we provide the outputs of the driver state, we actually already provide so much more. We know, for example, what is the gaze origin and the gaze direction. The side mirrors can be adjusted automatically for the driver. We know where the driver is looking in terms of there are more and more displays in the vehicles. For example, the infotainment, the instrument cluster, the head-up display. And you can interact with all of them. But how many joysticks can you have on the steering wheel to interact with all of these separately? But when you know where the driver is looking, it's the most powerful indicator for the driver's intent. If I'm looking at the HUD and I'm moving the joystick, clearly I'm not trying to change something in the IVI because I'm not looking there in the infotainment. So you can assign the right control based on my gaze direction. There is so much more that can be done with the existing outputs that I encourage anyone in the industry who is tied to it to leverage what's already there and improve the experience.
There's no doubt we want an improved experience. There's also no doubt that driver monitoring is playing an extremely important role in the future of autonomy. Today is tomorrow. Tomorrow is today. The future is Sepia. Tal, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to hear more, please kindly rate, review, and let us know what topics you'd like for us to explore next. Be sure to join us next week for another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, Unplugged, where I'll share my candid insights on the future of mobility.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.